Welcome to the SALT Leadership Podcast. Real people, real conversations, and a shared mission to lead and love our cities well. Cities don't change because of one person. They change when everyone steps in to lead. In your home, in your work, in your community, and in your city, you have influence. And this podcast is here to fuel that calling.
Welcome to the Salt and Light Leadership Podcast. My name is Kaylee, and I'm your host today, along with SALT's Executive Director, Ingrid Lewis. And we are here with a very special guest and dear friend of ours, Jantzen Miller. Welcome, Jantzen.
Thank you both for having me.
Yes, we are excited about today's show as we talk about prayer, hearing the voice of God, and leadership. And we're going to talk about that with Jantzen Miller, who is a business strategist and coach and speaker who helps leaders and organizations steward their God-given vision with excellence. She's also the author of the book Now Before Next. And so we are just excited to welcome you to the show, and we're going to jump right in.
I'm excited.
We know that the last few years have been pivotal for you. Would you describe who you were and the way you viewed God and how you viewed success during this time?
Yeah, I think that, and you guys saw this firsthand, in 2023, the Lord was clearly and had told me in multiple times and through different confirmations that it was time for sabbatical. And I really fought that because, again, and I was working with SALT at the time, and I thought, this is a God thing. This is, I want to be a part of this mission. But it was really, I could see where my identity was so wrapped up in that vision of my productivity, and my worth was tied to how other people perceived my leadership. And so I could see where he needed to put a hard stop to reset me. And Ingrid, you were so graceful in this period because, the Lord told me that in January and told me specifically that April 1st was my last day. And I fought it until March 27th. Oh. And it was, I just kept telling him, because I had told you I'll stay till April 30th. And God clearly told me, you can stay till April 30th, but there's no more oil after April 1st. Wow. If you stay later, you're on your own. And I knew that, especially with this work, which is so kingdom focused, you can't do it out of grit.
Absolutely.
And gritted teeth. You have to do it with the flow of the Holy Spirit. And so I wrestled with him when he told me that on, I think it was the 27th to the 28th. I wrestled with him all night long. And he finally he gave me this picture of me in a river holding on to this branch for dear life. And he just said, let go. So I was like, okay, Lord, that one's on you. I'm flowing, I'm going. And so I met with Ingrid. It was a Wednesday morning, and said, I'm so sorry, but Friday is my last day. And she said, do what the Lord tells you to do.
Wow.
And I got more done in 3 days than I had gotten done in 3 months.
God's grace.
God's grace.
Yep.
And so that started me on a journey because it's funny how achievers, we can kind of reason with God too. Like I said, well, I only took 4 weeks of maternity leave with my son. So yeah, I'll take an 8-week sabbatical. That way it's 12 weeks total of rest. And I had a dear friend say, I don't think that's how that works. I think it's going to be at least 4 months. And that made me nauseous. And so then I told God, well, okay, I'll give you at least 4 months. And as you guys kind of well know, that really just lifted probably like 8 weeks ago. So that was almost a 3-year break. And while I achieved things in that midst, like the book being one of them, he gave me grace to have certain projects, but really my dreams and my definition of success just completely turned to what he wanted it to be. And so until I finally gave in to, okay, Lord, what are you wanting to teach me in this season? Because even me releasing the book in March of 2024, I had these great plans for the book and this launch plan. And, my background's in marketing, so I had this full way to market the book. Launched the book on March 4th, 2024. Found out I was pregnant 5 days later.
Oh, wow.
And Ingrid knows, I was working with my first pregnancy. She knows how hard my pregnancies can be. And so I knew at that moment, as soon as I got the positive pregnancy test, this year is not going to look like what I thought. And I ended up not doing anything with the book in 2024 and kind of just gave it back to the Lord and said, maybe you'll use it again later, maybe not. But if anything, it's just your way's better. And so that kickstarted this even deeper view of, Lord, why is this season so hard for me? Why is this season of rest and non-productivity so hard? And he was showing me it's because my, false identity was really tied to this achiever, which God made me to achieve. I'm a high achieving person, but that outside of God's will can get really strivey.
Yeah. And
on top of that, he really showed me that success looks like surrendering to him.
That's right. So then what did surrender look like really in this season? Sometimes as leaders, we can understand that God is asking us to do a thing. And then we have all of these responsibilities and we say, is this God asking me to surrender, or is this burnout, or is this frustration? I mean, if someone were to say, Jantzen, how did you know that you were hearing the voice of God? What would you say?
Well, sometimes it's really clear. In the issue of sabbatical, it was really clear because I heard it in my quiet time, like journaling. He was telling me that. And then I had 2 or 3 people just out of nowhere make comments of like, do you think this? And so I was able to take that back to the Lord because, again, I think it's important to note, especially when we're trying to hear God's voice, and whether it's in somebody just speaking a word or somebody giving a very heavy prophetic word, that always has to be taken back to the Lord of, what do you say about this? Because I have made the mistake many times of, especially with like spiritual giants that were around, you'll get a prophetic word or get a word, and you take that and think, surely that's for me. Or even if it's true, you maybe try to interpret it yourself rather than with the Lord. That's where it gets really messy.
Yes.
Because I've just made this mistake of, you take a word and you interpret it in your own and you try to make it happen,
or what you want it to be.
Or what you want it to be, and you try to work it out. But really, when you hear words from others, even when you hear it for yourself, like, you have to go back and measure it again. Lord, what do you say about this? And tell me more about this, and help me to interpret this the way you want me to interpret it. Because many times, and this might go off the rails, but I think it's really important to note, when we hear words from others or directions from others, our job is not to make that happen.
Yes.
Like the prophetic words that I've received, the mistake that I've made around prophecy is that I get a word and it sounds incredible. And it's like, okay, now Lord, my job is to go make that happen.
You got to be the doer.
You have to be the doer. And that is actually not our job. In fact, that can either leave us striving, or it can leave us really discouraged because we think God's just going to, boom, drop it on our plate, magic genie it. It's a wish, and I don't have to do anything with it. Our job, when we get a prophetic word or when we hear from the Lord that way, is to just ask God, who do I need to be in order for that word to come to pass? Because my job is to become the person who can carry out that word.
That's good. That's good.
So if I, get a word of, you're going to do this or you're going to lead this, my job is not to go build the strategic plan for how to make that happen. My job is to take that back to the Lord and say, show me who I need to become to steward that word. Because if I become that person, God will make the rest happen.
Okay, so let me back you up just a little bit. In order for you to trust what you're hearing from the Holy Spirit, you have to have this relationship.
Oh my gosh.
With the Lord. And I do want to say that, the Lord speaks to us in various ways. He speaks to us through his word. He speaks to us through people, circumstance, all of those things. But first, you have to say, I know who that is. So tell us a little bit about your journey with understanding who God is in your life.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great step back, because I have not always heard the voice of the Lord like this. And it does take practice and experiential wisdom that only comes by getting it wrong. I hate to say that, but that's the truth.
You gotta get it wrong.
And there's so much grace for that. But we have to be willing to try, because, I was raised in more of a cessationist view that like God stopped speaking in the Bible, like Revelation, book closes, and so I really never had relationship with Jesus. In fact, it wasn't until I went through SALT and Wes was teaching on hearing the voice of God, and I'm looking around the room going, what do you know that I don't know? And in God's grace, I had been hearing him, here and there for years, but it would be kind of circumstantial, and it would be whether or not I was paying attention. And even at that, I did not have a clear relationship with him. It was all based on rules. And so going through SALT and hearing just other people talk about God in a way that I'm like, what? I want what he's having, or I want what she's having,
Right.
And so at that point, I really started digging in. And that is something that, and I've shared with you, if I really love anything about my personality, it's the fact that I'm a little bit stubborn in my hunger. If I see you have it, I'm going to go, why can't I?
want some of that too.
I want some of that.
Yeah.
And if what's standing between me and getting that is effort, I'll put in the effort, So I started, it was actually in SALT that we learned kind of more of a systematic process for hearing the voice of God, the keys, the 4 keys. And that was so helpful, but it still started me down this path of I had to strip off this false narrative of God that was, he is this high authority who's just waiting for me to make a mistake. I have to get it right. And just over the past 4 or 5 years, I mean, he's just taken me back to this basic understanding of grace and that he wants relationship with us.
That's
and he's really not a God who has his thumb on us, just waiting for us to make a mistake. He wants us to grow with him, and he wants us to learn with him. And so it's really starting to hear his voice. That was probably back in 2020, early 2021. And it started with journaling. And then from there, really went into understanding prophecy and how other people could hear him. And since that point, leading up, 5-6 years later, it's gotten to the point to where through practice,
Yes.
because I think that's another thing we need to talk about too. It's not something that you just have or you don't. It's a muscle, and it
How
takes
do you
practice.
that? How do you practice that?
I practice that through journaling, but I've also just practiced it through sitting with God and saying, what do you want to tell me right now? Even while I'm driving, or, before now getting to the point to where like, before I go into meetings, what do you want to tell me? Or what do you want this agenda to look like? Giving him free reign. But I didn't get to the place I am now of this, it kind of is so much easier to hear him because I've figured out his frequency for me. But I would be remiss not to go back and say, when I first started this, it was really hard because I had a lot of layers of legalism that I had to strip off with him and say, Lord, I could be hearing you wrong. And sometimes I did. Ultimately, I made decisions based on what I thought God was telling me to do. And only in hindsight could I tell you, that wasn't God.
Yeah.
That was my ego. Or that was my people pleasing, or, that was religion, whatever. But has he worked it all out for good? Absolutely. And so as we practice hearing the voice of God, we have to keep Romans 8:28 in the back of our minds.
That's right.
Even if I hear him wrong, he's going to work it out for good.
That's right.
And he's focused on our heart. He measures our heart. And if our heart and desire is to know him and want to do his will, he's not waiting with his thumb down to squash us if we get it wrong. Right. I think he's just like a father, like cheering on his child trying to walk for the first time.
Yeah, and he's always teaching us. And I think of a teacher like it's a process.
The
teacher is teaching you. And so hearing God's voice is like he's teaching us to hear what he sounds like and what he sounds like to Jantzen and what he sounds like to Ingrid and what he sounds like to me. And so I love that God has unraveled this legalistic performance achievement kind of view for yourself and view of God, and has, brought you into a new season of who you are and how you view God and how you view leadership. I'm really excited to hear about that too.
That's really good. And one of the things that, I want to lean a little bit more into is the spiritual practice of silence and solitude and And how has that impacted how you hear God's voice, how you lead, how you encourage other leaders? I mean, what does that practice actually look like for you?
Well, right now I'm a mom of 2 littles.
Yep.
So you'll laugh. I mean, Ingrid knows, like she's got, 1,000 kids.
Yeah.
So she gets it. And 7 feels like 1,000 and 2 feels like 500, But so that has had to really ebb and flow. But what I've had to do is kind of as making those pockets of time with the Lord. And again, you have to be, what I've struggled with, especially in parenting, is like almost being resentful of my kids, of taking time away from my God time. We talked about like Chef woke up at 4 a.m. this morning and it was like, brother, this is my quiet time. And then you started to get hateful because you're like, you're taking time away. But again, like God saying, if you just do what you're supposed to do, only what I've asked you to do, there's so much grace. And so on the days when I'm able to have that set time, 5:30, 6 o'clock before the kids are up, it is sitting with the Lord. I start with worship. One, it's like a wake up where you're like, you have that time when you wake up, and especially whether you're an early bird or not, you're like, I need some like lull time while I'm getting the juices going. And so just starting with worship and letting him, and I'll ask him even like, is there a song you want me to listen to?
That's good. And
sometimes the song pops in my head and it's like, well, that made it easy. And then sometimes it's like, okay, we're going to Waymaker it up again today. All right. And so I start with a worship song, and then I usually will like read through a scripture, just kind of meditating on it. But when I'm spending time with God, it is really shutting down my mind and getting out a journal and saying, what do you want to say to me today? Or sometimes there's a specific question, something that I'm struggling with. How can I do this better? Like show me what I'm missing. But having that time with him allows him to speak into the quiet. And I'll give a really practical business example. Is, as I mentioned, I just started consulting again about 8 weeks ago. And I'm going to go off topic, but this is really relevant for hearing God's voice and how, once we're in agreement with God, like things just can accelerate so fast. So I was trying for years to start working again. Like I like to work. Yeah. And so it was really hard for me to not work. And actually it was last April that I finally was at the time where banks could go to Mother's Day out and I could have a little bit of childcare, that I was ready to work. And a dear friend and who, Sarah Horton and I were meeting, and Sarah raised Presley, who we all love.
Yes, beautiful.
And, wisdom is known by her fruit. So I'm just like, woman, show me what you did. How do I raise a spirit-filled human, And so we were talking, and she said, why are you fighting being a stay-at-home mom right now? Like, because it was so obvious to her that I was still striving to do something that God hadn't really released me to do yet. And I said, I've tried everything except that. And I'm now at the point to where I guess I could try that and see if that's what God wants, because I feel like I'm banging my head up against a wall trying to make things happen. So I did. I just gave myself permission. Well, we tried everything else. We might as well try this. And going back to hearing God's voice, sometimes it's like that, where you just have to try in order to know, and you learn by doing.
Right.
And so I did. I surrendered to that season of household management. I should have had a coffee mug made that I was a household manager.
Oh, no, that's a big deal.
It's a big deal, as you know. So I actually found myself enjoying it. And that's how you kind of know, oh, okay, or maybe this is something that I'm supposed to be in this season. And so all, from April till December of last year, I really leaned in and was like, whatever, we're just going to do it. Again, we've tried everything else. So finally, I had an opportunity to help a friend with a project. I say a friend, we're kind of third party connected, but it was a kingdom focused project. And so we sit down for coffee in December, and he said, so what are you doing for work now? And old me would have tried to qualify the season I was in. Well, I'm staying at home and I don't want to, and I'm really ambitious and I have these projects, but God's not, I'm trying to like prove who God says I am.
That's
and
right. Instead of walking in that identity.
Instead of just walking in your identity. But for the first time ever, I didn't do that. He said, what are you doing for work now? And I said, oh, I'm not. I'm just staying at home with the boys. They're at Mother's Day out today. And so I've got a little bit of time, but I'm happy to chat. I'm happy to help you however I can. And it's like this weight lifted where God was like, you no longer have your identity tied to your career. And you no longer are looking for that validation of who I say you are.
That's right.
Like, I know what God has said to me about being in the business realm and the things that maybe he's called me to do. It's not my job to go prove that to anybody else. And when we carry that need and that ego to validate what God says, let's be honest, that's why I was in the season I was in, because God was trying to strip that off of me. And the cool part is, as soon as those words left my mouth, my phone rang. And it was a friend of mine who's a business owner. And he and I have talked for years about working together. But again, he hears God's voice clearly. And he has said, I do not have a green light to work with you.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
He had told me that for years. God has not given me a green light to work with you. Which, you're like, well, that's annoying. But he called me as soon as those words left my mouth. And I turned my phone over and I thought, I'll call him back when we leave. And I'm walking out to my car after I had this meeting. It was such a good meeting. And I call him back and he said, hey, I just got the green light to work with you.
Wow.
Literally, as soon as those words left my mouth, he called me, and it was like a door opened where as soon as I came into agreement with God, God was like, now we can work. And so that, I get chills thinking about it, but like that's what kind of just 2 months ago, God saying, my way's better.
That's right.
And my way is actually more efficient. Because I get this picture of, especially with achievers, it's like when it comes to the things God wants us to do, or those where he wants us to get to, I think of this like cliffside, beautiful, you're just staring out over the ocean. You just got to get to that trail. You come to the end of a trail and you're at a cliffside. And God is saying, you can either take it your way, which is the path of least resistance, and it's going to be smoother, but it's going to take so much longer. And in the end, it's not going to be as efficient. But if you take my way, you may have to, machete your way through that trail because you've never gone that way before. But I promise you, it's a shorter trip in the end, and it will save you so much time. And it may hurt, but it's going to be better, and it's going to be more efficient because it's his way than going your own way, which is the smooth sailing path. So hearing his voice and like seeing him shape my identity in that way has been really fun, because now even in that, the friend who called me and said, we can work together, I need help with a strategic planning project. I'm like, great. I don't even really have to pray about this. Like, the Lord already knows I'm in, and I had felt it in my spirit. Okay, I can say yes to this. And so I'm preparing for that meeting the old way, old wineskin. God's like, we don't do that anymore. We don't plan for meetings the way you think a meeting should go down. You don't do a strategic, a vision casting the old way. You ask me what the agenda is.
It's really good.
And so I asked him, what's the agenda? And he told me, and I thought, no way. That is, they will laugh me out of the room if that's my agenda. It's too simple. Like, they're going to think I'm dumb. And he's like, are you going to do it your way or mine?
Oh, yeah.
And that was Monday. And I said, well, we'll talk about this later. The meeting wasn't on until Thursday. And so the week went crazy. And Wednesday night, I looked up and realized, oh my gosh, I have not created that agenda. And so put the kids to bed. Sean's in the room. I'm like, I'm going to go to the guest room. That's kind of my secret place. I'm like, I'm going to the guest room. I got to chat with my dad because we got a problem. And so I sit down. I'm like, Lord, I don't have this agenda. And he's like, I already gave you the agenda.
What are we going to do?
And at that point, it was like, well, I ran out of time. That's literally the only thing. And guys, like, when I tell you that agenda unlocked, like, they were able to flow in creativity. We were able to get so much done. They were looking at me like I just figured out like the craziest back-end code, you know what I mean, that you've ever seen on a computer. And I would have thought it was too simple. And had I done it my way, it would have maybe felt smoother because it was the path well paved. It's what other business strategists would have done. But God's way was the right way.
That's right.
For that person. And so I think we have to think about hearing his voice. Not only is it for obedience, because he also wants to give us good gifts.
Yeah.
And he wants us to do it the better way.
Here's what I want to revisit just briefly, because I don't want us to miss this, is oftentimes as women, and I'm going to go there.
Let's go there.
Talk to us a little bit about how your identity got massaged, during that period. You touched on it when you said, I understand that my identity is not tied to what I do, but talk to us a little bit about that, it almost sounds like to me like a metamorphosis,
That's a great point. And it was a metamorphosis, and it's continuing. In the season I just came out of, my family time, or my time with my kids, took up the majority of the pie. And I had to let the Lord be the one that dictate what the other slices were.
That's good.
And so, but that's really frustrating because there's no control there. I mean, genuinely.
Yeah.
And but God, I want the slice for work to be 50-50, And he was like, no, it's more like everything else is 98% and that's like 2.
Yeah.
And even looking back and writing the book scratched the itch. It was like how I filled that 2%. But after that quota was filled, it was like, okay, that portion of the pie is filled now. So you're going to do what I told you to do. And what was really helpful for me, and this has carried me forward, and I've put it into practice, and now I've shared it with other friends, is before you even set goals, before you think about what you want to accomplish, one of the most imperative questions you need to answer is, Lord, what season am I in?
That's good.
Because that understanding will actually lead the way, because every decision you make, every goal you pursue has to fit within the confines of that season. So as I mentioned, like 2024, Lord, what season is this? And it was a season of, I'm trying to think of the exact word he gave me, but it was pretty much the equivalent of nothing, and because it was kind of just, my kid, sweet boy, like I was miserable, sick, all the things. He's living off yogurt pouches and, scrambled eggs for 7 or 8 months,
That's
whatever.
the way it is.
And that's just the way it is. I got nothing done, and it was a season of receiving, which I was not comfortable with, because that took a lot of humility to even admit I need help. So then even last year, I had banks at the end of 2024 in November. 2025, I started that year and said, okay, Lord, what season is this? And he said, it's a season of household management and preparation. Cool. Every goal had to fit within that. So when somebody would come and say, hey, I've got this opportunity, or do you want to do that? It's like, well, I need to talk to the Lord about it. But there were some things that I didn't even need to. That's right. Because it was like he and I were already connected, but it was also very clear that can't fit within the confines of this season.
Yeah, that clarity.
It was such clarity. And so the cool part was, even back in December, maybe before meeting with that friend, he was already talking to me about the season we were going into, which was mastery. I want you to master your time. I want you to master your energy. Like you need to, because once again, it's not you don't have all the time in the world. We know this as women, and we know this as, if you're mother people. Or just people or in that business place, you've got to really hone in and be excellent with whatever you have. And so it's not control. Like, I'm not trying to control my time. I'm trying to master my time. And so he was already talking to me about that before the decision started changing. The season was clear.
Thanks for joining us on the SALT Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we want to encourage you, share it with somebody who needs to hear this. And also make sure that you subscribe or like or follow so that you can keep up with the latest episode of the SALT Leadership Podcast.